Ask the GMs, episode 29, Runequest Introduction. Good evening, this is Zach from Ask the GMs podcast. Welcome to another great evening talking about board games and RPGs. Handing myself off to RC.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm RC. Do a quick shout out to Cape Fear Games and just all of the local game stores, but in particular for us, Cape Fear Games. They've been really great hosts. We really enjoy having them around. Really great staff. Passing it off to Brian.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian. Excited to talk about Runequest. It's pretty expansive, so we'll keep it easy tonight and hand it off to Sean.
Yeah. Going to go through a little bit of history, a little bit of product, some core ideas on it, and get everybody kind of familiar with it. And pass it back to Zach.
Thank you. Brian and Sean were nice enough to curate this episode, so I'm just going to be mainly guiding the conversation. RC and I will butt in every once in a while because we might have an opinion or two. But Sean, do you want to cover the brief history of the concept in the game that is RuneQuest?
RuneQuest is an RPG that was created by Greg Stafford, Chaosium. It extended out of in the board games White Bear, Red Moon, that came out in 1975 and later renamed Dragon Pass. And the RPG itself came out in 1978. Now, Greg had been writing to this world of Glorantha, which is what the RuneQuest world is set in. And since the late 60s, as part of a kind of a thought practice, an idea thing of writing for a fantasy world and such like that. And he also incorporated a lot of his own spiritual beliefs into it. And then that gave birth eventually also to the war games and to the RPG that we have today.
And which edition of RuneQuest are we in now?
We are currently in the 4th edition.
Yep. First edition, I think, only lasted for about a year, 78. I think 79 or 80 is when the second edition came out. And then the third edition, or the Avalon Hill edition, which is when Chaosium licensed RuneQuest to be made by Avalon Hill, that one came out in 1984. And then Mongoose's edition came out in 2006. RuneQuest 2, second version of the Mongoose edition, came out in 2010. And then the current edition is 2018.
And wasn't there also a HeroQuest RPG? Not related to the other brand of HeroQuest, just throwing it out there.
There was. I am not personally as familiar with that. I think that came out in around 2003. Or, I'm sorry, Hero Wars came out in 2000. 2003 is HeroQuest. 2009 was HeroQuest 2nd edition. And then 2015 was HeroQuest Glorantha. And then 2020 Quest Worlds, the SRD, was released.
Very good. I just know there was a weird mixing of those two in the 2000s.
Yeah, it was. HeroQuest is definitely a narrative RPG versus a traditional RPG, where your character creation is based on things like core ideas or character, keywords type things and such.
And do you want to give us an overview on the current product line if you were one to get into RuneQuest right now?
Sure, I'd love to. If you want to get into RuneQuest right now, you can. The easiest way to get into it would probably be with the starter set, which is currently $29.99 American. That has 4 soft cover manuals that basically cover the rule, setting, and scenario. They give you 3 scenarios, dice that you need to play the game, a set of pre-made characters, and they also give you like a strike rank tracker because later, whenever there's combat, you need that. It's important. So that's just the starter set. But
Now, Brian, I don't want to interrupt you too much.
yeah,
They give you a crap ton of characters. They don't give you like 4. They're like 10 or 12 in there.
I haven't looked at the pre-made characters. I didn't realize there was that many. That's pretty cool, though.
They give you no. It's like 10 or 12. That's a lot.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them.
And also the characters are not just like a little 3x5 index card of information. It's a full portfolio of 2 pamphlet folded edges in the center character sheet, front and back. I mean,
Fully colored, like
Yep.
colored well too, not just like a little bit of white and then a blue splotch there.
And you get a backstory for each character along with it too, so you have some more context for them.
so, I mean, it's definitely the starter set, kind of as far as the kind of quality level.
Well, additionally, I think if I were designing the starter set, I think they were kind of bold and like, no, let's just provide a lot of characters because they didn't want to intimidate something with the character creation, which we'll get through later in the episode.
All right, so you get your starter pack. After you have your starter pack, you're like, wow, Glorantha is pretty dope. I want to spend a lot of time here. I think the next logical transition would be to move to the slip case set, which is basically the complete RuneQuest experience, all hardcover books, and that'll run you about $120 American. You're getting quite a bit in that, right? So the first major thing that you get in that set is going to be just the role playing in Glorantha, which is the essential rules. Tells you how to play the game. Tells you how to create characters. Rune magic, spirit magic, blades combat, anything you need to play the game, right? But you also get the bestiary, which is exactly what it sounds like. It provides a lot of fantasy entities, and that information is great to like put into adventures. So it's on its own. The bestiary is $39.99, so that's not too bad. Then you also get the Game Master Screen Pack, which is usually $29.99 on its own. And that's more than just like, a play aid or, setting up your little boundary there. It does contain the Game Master screen itself, does contain like a large landscape, 4 panels, cardboard screen. You do get a 128-page adventure book detailing the Kingdom of Sartar, which is a pretty pivotal location in Glorantha. And you also get 3 adventures designed for beginning characters, which is cool. It'll help out. You also get a 20-page reference booklet that's full of fun things like charts and references to make play easy. You get a 16-page Gloranthian calendar, excuse me, and then an additional 7 ready-to-play pre-generated characters. And it says deluxe adventure sheets, which is pretty dope.
Now, Brian, one cool thing about the bestiary, the big monster book, in addition to having things to poke and prod, it also gives you the rules if you want to play some of the monstrous races. Like if you want to be an elf or a troll.
Yes, and it also describes the Talmori, which are essentially human werewolves.
Yep. Also, the screen itself, very beautiful. It's very privately colored. Like a lot of screens, if you look on the inside, are like taupe or like paper in a negative way. This one is very, very clean, very crisp, very beautiful to look at. Very nice in the eyes.
And the artwork on the exterior side facing the player is also very well done in the sense that it captures kind of the spirit and feel of the game and the game world. So it helps the players kind of get into the mindset as well.
Yes, it should go without saying that the artwork in every single piece of RuneQuest I've looked at, like all the books I've looked over, the art is just great in all of them.
I think we should also preface, not to be prudes, but the fact that it's set in kind of a Babylonian era. You might need to be an adult if you get these books. There might be, topless women, and you might have to, be an adult.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it comes down to that, RuneQuest is never was intended as like a child's game. It was always aimed towards a mature audience. And that doesn't mean that you can't have people that are minors playing it and such. It's, but that, as you said, the parents need to be aware of what they're purchasing for their child.
And to be fair, while there are topless women, it is tastefully done and reflective of people in Babylonian culture. So you're going to see it in mosaics or paintings, or just that person walking around in that culture would be topless. It is not a nudie magazine.
Right. There's no sexualization of any of the nudes. And if I'm not mistaken, there's even some partial nude male scenes also, so it's not just a strictly female nudes and such like that.
Yeah, the new
Either.
the new myth book got very close to full male nudity.
And again, it's done respectfully. It's done in a mature manner, a non-sexualized manner. It's done in the same way you would go to, say, the Smithsonian and look at, Minoan or Mayacean, you know, frescoes and such like that portray like the women and men jumping over the bulls and such like that. And yes, you can see, you know, people are topless, people are bottomless kind of thing. But it is not sitting there like, like a cheap porn mag or anything like that.
Or it's also like going to like a nicer theater or opera where you might see naked women as part of the buttresses and like the theater seats. But
Yep.
that's just part of the architecture. That's not like, ooh.
Right. And also, I mean, even, going to the theater and sometimes even on Broadway shows, they have nudity in the shows and such like that. Again, it is not a cheap kind of, risque, a burlesque type demonstration. It is a mature, tastefully done, and respectfully done presentation.
I think you need to be extremely mature to be at a burlesque show, but that's a different topic, different night.
Yep. That's when we cover Berlin.
Brian
Or
and
chaos.
Brian and the great LARPing adventure at the burlesque house.
Oh my
Yeah.
god!
Ba-da-da-dum, bum, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bum.
That's your next character, Brian.
You do not want me to play that character in public.
I mean, I kind of do, but I also like chaos as much as RC.
I can just see, it's kind of like me at Christmas when my family pays me not to sing Christmas songs.
I was waiting for somebody to ask me to stop singing on Tuesday, but
Never gonna happen.
okay, that's fine. Anywho, yeah, let's get back to RuneQuest. Get back on the rail. So that pretty much covers everything that was in the slipcase, burlesque and all. So then there is a decent amount of supplement books, and these are things that help gameplay immensely. And if this is going to be your bread and butter, that you just want to be an expert on Floranthian mythology and playing this is what you need. This is like the kit and caboodle for especially um, religions. There's multiple cults of RuneQuest series. There's one that is just called the Cult of RuneQuest. It just came out. That one will run you $39.99, and it provides a great understanding of just the rich and textured, like, mythological world of Glorantha. It shows, dozens of myths and all the pantheon. Basically, it's great. And that's a pretty. It's moving down, more into the weeds, as you say. So you definitely learn more, just history and context of what's happening in just the original text. Then we have the Prospedia, which is $37.99, and that is another reference for many gods and goddesses. But you also
Yeah,
get
that
monsters.
that one's closer to like an actual reference book. Like it's not bad, but it's definitely like, who is this god? Here's like a one panel article on them.
Yeah, that you're right. You are correct about that. But I mean, yeah, you're right. What would you say the cult of Runequest is then? Like, would you say that's just like the mythology behind everything?
So the big myth book you talked about earlier is just like the overarching myth. The Prosopedia is basically like, hey, do you need to quickly reference or look for something? And then the split called books are very focused. Like if you have the Lightbringers, it's all the Lightbringer gods, which is a majority of the gods that most people tend to worship when they make their first characters. And then there's the Earth God book, which is like another big section of that people focus on.
Yeah.
So
Red magic also, which
Yeah, and
provides
I'm
the
sure
whole
there will
lunar
be other
empire.
ones.
well, the red magic also just has all the spells in it.
Yeah, and then there is the weapons and equipment book as well, which obviously does what it says it does. There are a few things that I thought were funny in there while I was looking over it. One of the things that I enjoyed was it gives you like a breakdown of exotic war beasts. So, for example, dragon newts can ride demibirds, and a Petronodon, which is like a giant dinosaur, I assume. And Triceratops and unicorns. Oh, I'm sorry, unicorn riders ride unicorns.
It also has a cool breakdown of like different metals and their worth, and this is really important in the Bronze Age. And hiring, it's actually like it's more than just stuff book.
Yeah, and it also brings in things like the rules on ships and naval warfare and such like that, and it the equipment book also with like the beasts and such like that, because also beasts have their own mythology and histories as well, so it further uh, expands on that knowledge base. Instead, you get
Yep, and each culture kind of has their own weapons, so it kind of breaks it down by that, and they're like how expensive they are. It's definitely a very useful book in terms of once again getting more in an era setting in the Babylonian structure. Like you're not going to see a lot of iron.
No, you might see a little bit, but it has the most important tenet in RuneQuest, and I'm saying that very seriously. It has the rules for land ownership because you can role play owning land.
I'm not mistaken, it's kind of a critical part of the game.
It can be.
not to jump ahead subject wise, but with the RuneQuest RPG setting, it is not a game of just kill things and take their stuff. uh, And it is not also just a sit around and talk playing game. Also, there is dice involved, and there are a lot of, like you said, core concepts like land ownership, also the art of ransom. Uh, You know, in this game, it is completely acceptable if you're being overpowered by an enemy to throw up your hands and say, "Hey, I give up and I've got a ransom. You need to contact these people and such." And it's a standard practice in the cultures of the world.
Well, Sean, let's let Brian finish up his product line overview. But if you want to go into a brief primer on the setting before we get to core mechanics, that would also be good.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm close to being done. So we've got the books about the gods. We have equipment. We've got um, just some general supplement books there. Magic, that was it. Uh, there's two like adventure books, and that's the Pegasus Plateau and Other Stories, which is 7 complete adventures, like ready to play. Um, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but there are 7 of them, and there is also over 500 spells for both rune and spirit magic in there, so it's just additional fun stuff that you get to do. Um, and then the other storybook is the Smoking Ruin and Other Stories, which has a total of 6 adventures. And that's through like the southern wilds of Glorantha. Um, so it's a little bit different than anything that we've really looked at, but still, it's just like another tool that you can use to build an adventure, or really really beat a character to death as far as like age wise, because time is something that happens in this game.
Very good. So we've talked about like where it comes from and what you can get for it. But Sean, tell us about what is Galanthra. What is RuneQuest? What is RuneQuesting?
RuneQuesting is the core of all magic in the world of Glorantha is tied to the runes and the gods that are associated with those runes. And you can have more than one god associated with a rune. And there are combinations of the runes that define also the gods. And the magic system is about the learning of and mastering of the runes, such as you go on quests and such like that. The game has several different spiritual developments for characters in the sense of you can pursue the path of a shaman, you can pursue the path of either a rune lord or a rune priest, which rune lords are more of the fighting type category, rune priests are more of obviously the religious and organized religion aspect of it. And it is essentially this, like, since time primordial fight and quests such like that and development of this whole world. I mean, you can go for hours just talking about the whole mythological history and such like that of RuneQuest, but the essential aspect is the rune.
Yeah, and it's a big deal because like the runes do make everything, not even just the gods, but everything. Humans are the combination of the air rune and the man rune, versus trolls are the man rune and the dark rune.
Exactly. Everything is tied to the runes. And I mean, right down to the almost kind of common everyday magic, because everybody, again, that is another core concept, is everybody uses magic in Glorian. What type of magic you use may differ, but everybody uses magic, especially spirit magic, which is um, smaller spells like blade sharps or multi-missile or Farsi or whatever.
The kind of magic that if we were in a different setting would be like hedge magic versus an actual wizard.
Correct. Cantrips kind of thing. But everything is again skill tied to runes because if you know the spell Blade Sharp, you can't just per se cast it on your sword because of what the spell essentially does is improves your chance to hit with the sword and your damage with the sword. But you have to prep the weapon by inscribing on the weapon somewhere the runes associated with that spirit magic. And so they I mean, but still, again, it is though something everybody knows. Everybody knows some little magic. A merchant may know, detect gold, so he can cast it on coins that are being handed to him and such like that, or detect, this or that. There are a lot of detection spells, from everything from detect water to detect almost every mineral known and such like that.
I think there's a couple on lying too, which a merchant might also want.
Exactly. And again, the game has so many different aspects that no matter what your interests as far as character development goes, in the mythological background of the world and everything of that, you can create any character you want. Whether it is the wizard, the priest, the noble, the merchant, the thief, the even the bard-like characters and such like that. There are mythological backgrounds and such like that that will push those character archetypes kind of forward and can be fully developed with the feeling that you're not just some generic character pasted on over a character sheet in the world. There's an investment as far as the gods, the runes, the magic that you use. And
Well, I think everybody would love to know, as far as the runes are concerned, what do they represent? And they're effectively cosmic archetypes of elements at the base. So you have fire and sky, you have water, air, earth, darkness, and then um, those are the big ones. And of course, as Sean said, and yes, moon. Well, moon's questionable though, right?
it depends on what culture you're coming from, too.
And spirit is the other one, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because like moon is the shady one versus darkness is fine.
And also, the other runes, well, those are the basic element runes. Then the other runes often are the condition, whether it's stability, mobility, you know.
Life, death,
Truth and
man,
illusion.
beast, chaos, and wall.
Man, death,
Man and beast,
Yep.
yeah.
uh, undeath, unlife. That is one. It's not usually you're not going to have a character that has it, but it does exist.
And things that are in Runequest that are evil. I mean, this is not to say Runequest is a world of um, diametrically opposed white versus black, good versus evil kind of thing. There are various shades of gray. But when something really truly steps into the realm of evil, it is evil. It is turn your stomach evil. And they don't beat around the bush on that. They present it as it is.
Like a giant bat eating my grandfather's soul.
Yeah? Or the brew, the goat men and their people kind of thing. They're pretty horrific. Such.
So we kind of got the base overview of the concept. We've mentioned it's Babylonian. It has a big mythological feel. Like this is definitely the world of myth. You could play without the myth, but you're kind of missing like 90% of the setting. But let's get into those core mechanics. Let's get into past the basic BRP and percentiles, but into the heavier stuff.
Well, as you said, just a real quick rundown. It is basically a BRP system, 3d6. You have your basic abilities: strength, con, size, power, intelligence, and dexterity and charisma, and such. But yeah, as far as the character creation goes, beyond that aspect, okay, that's where the game can get pretty heavy pretty quick for somebody that isn't familiar with Glorantha.
Right. Because after runes, which is, very basic, kind of the one of the next things that you need to be aware of is your cult. Because you're in a cult or you're about to be in a cult, and it's not like a negative connotation like a lot of people might think of, like, oh, it's, Russell Simmons and his cult or whoever it was. This is just a community. It's basically your family. It gives you access to, the cult's camaraderie and family, but you're also basically worshiping the same gods. So you're gonna have access to, a fraction of that deity's power manifested from the runes, the rune magic through them. So it's all very connected, and that's something that is unique to RuneQuest in the game mechanics is your cults, because it determines who you're worshiping and what runes you have.
And also the use of the term cults. I mean, in a RuneQuest standard, things like the worship of Zeus, or to use some popular, well-known deities in our world, kind of thing, Zeus, Apollo, and such like that. The followers of those deities, those would have been called cults. So that's the kind of level that we're talking about, is not just like, as you said, a brainwashing bad entity, as the term is used often today. And but beyond that, also, your family history determines who your character really is as well. In the sense of, there are, depending on the culture that you decide to choose to originate your character in, and whether it's Sartar, whether it's Praxian, and such like that, and there are charts that you're going to roll to determine, you know, what happened to your grandparents, what happened to your parents, what experiences did they have? Did they talk about, and were you taught about them and such, so that you then, that all plays into the character creation. It affects skills that you have, it affects things like passions and such like that in the characters. There's in such like, honor, loyalty, cowardice, as fear, hatred, and such are all often determined in there. There is, just so that it's put out there, there is a shortcut system that they have in there. So if you're trying to make a character quickly, you don't have to sit there and roll on all the charts and everything like that. They give you some basic formulas of points to put here and there and such like that. But really, part of the fun of creating a character in RuneQuest is to go through the whole background and see your character and their family sort of develop in front of you.
Yeah, I think an important part of that life path system is like, no, you start with both sets of grandparents, then go into parents, and then go into you. And you can see, like, if you have hatreds, if you have loves, which gods you might want to focus on based on what your parents did, whether your family was farmers, whether they were merchants, maybe they were warriors.
Or even, brigands and philosophers and poets and stuff. There's a lot of choices that can be made in the game. And that's part of the fun of it, is that you're not just making a fighter, a cleric, a magic user. You know, you're making, so and so of the cult of Esrolia, and of the earth goddess, kind of thing. And, you know, even your viewpoint on politics and such like that is going to be kind of, your character's viewpoint is kind of not like dictated, but it is suggested that, these are the views of the culture, the cults, the background that your character came from, and such. And so as a role player, you kind of can develop a feel for the character, really. You're invested in the character.
I think I'm going to attempt to try and sum up everything you said, Sean. Um, so there are no character classments or alignments. Characters are defined by their culture, the gods they follow, and the runes that inspire them. Helps to roleplay, right?
I
For
was going to jump
example,
in.
oh yeah, go on, RC.
I was going to jump in and say real quick because Sean did briefly touch on it, but there, and I believe Zach did too, where you roll on the familial chart, and you can end up with hatreds, and the game actually rewards you for playing into those
It's hatreds and passions. It's like you're supposed to kind of go that way because of what happened in your character's past.
Or if you come from a group of people that sort of values honor, or even treachery in the cases depending on which end of the spectrum you're on. Like actually playing into it rewards you, and it makes it easier for your character to sort of move through life as it is, with like outside of just plain old adventuring.
I think it's going to be a lot less, the Catholic priest murdering somebody in a church with, the way that your character is set up. You're not going to do that in Glorantha.
Well, the passions, though, are not just hatreds and such like that. It can also be love of your family, a loyalty to your king or queen, or your, city that you came from. So I mean, it is positive influences as well as negative influences, and a lot of this also originally wasn't in the RPG. They found when they when Chaosium developed originally the Pendragon RPG is where they brought in the idea of passions and such like that, and vices and such. And they found that it added such a depth of role playing to have kind of a measurement of where you were on those things, that they brought it into RuneQuest as well, because it works so well within the setting and such. And again, RuneQuest is, in my opinion, and I'm biased on this, is so of much of a kind of demonstration of the quality of RPG material produced by Chaosium. Um, that, and it's not just one-sided. It's not just like, oh, they really produced RuneQuest stuff really well. Chaosium has shown repeatedly the ability to handle, you know, in all its games, different time periods, different cultures, different, you know, and mature subjects in a tasteful way and such like that. And if you're familiar with any of their other products, you're going to be happy with RuneQuest. Whether you're a Pendragon fan from back in the day, whether you're a Call of Cthulhu fan, or maybe you played some of the other older titles that they no longer have the licenses to, such as Stormbringer, ElfQuest, or Ringworld, such like that. Coming forward, you're going to find, and I speak from experience in that realm, this game really has it, and it combines some of the best elements out there from all of those games.
Thank you, Sean. I have a couple small topics that I'm going to save for the end, but do you want to cover some of the core mechanisms, just like how combat is a little different, being an definite example?
Combat is definitely different. Again, it's different, but also familiar. Here, if you're familiar with Call of Cthulhu, say, you're familiar with the percentage-based roll to hit or parry in combat kind of thing. And you do have, you know, you have that exchange of like attack, parry, and such like that. And that it is familiar in the sense of Call of Cthulhu is similar, but not identical. It also, though, elaborates on the combat system with the hit location system. So you have hit points per location. So combat can get very deadly very quick. You can lose the use of an arm or an arm entirely, per se. And it also bases itself on you have a critical success, a special success, and a standard success. Standard success is rolling under your percentage. It's, special success is rolling under 20%. And then a critical success is rolling 1/5 of your percentile chance.
And there's also the strength rank chart.
And also you have, as I said, you have hit location, you have armor per location, plus also your weapons have hit points too. So let's say you make a successful parry, but the person had a critical success, as their weapon is now doing damage to your weapon or to your shield and such like that, and you can have your weapons break, shield be destroyed, or even if they hit well enough and with enough power, they can literally smash through your weapon, your shield, and then inflict skill damage on you, even though you rolled a parry. You've done is you've reduced it, but you haven't been able to stop it. If they really roll successfully. And that I think has to be stressed again, is that combat is extremely deadly in the game. You just don't go wandering in and pick a fight with a bunch of, as as a warrior, you're not going to wander into a group of trolls and be like, "Hey, I'm going to take out this group of trolls by myself." Kind of like the D&D mindset has.
Well, that's also why I think the strength rank is so important, because of your size and speed. Kind of like, hey, I'm a really big guy and I'm fast. Okay, I'm going to attack before someone else even gets a chance to.
That also brings up the system doesn't use a traditional initiative system. It uses the strike rank system. And your strike rank is determined by your size, your dexterity, and also by the type of weapon you're using and such. And also, it can be influenced by your encumbrance level too. So if you're carrying too much stuff, you're slowed down. Such, but certain weapons are going to be faster than others. But certain weapons also have a reach effect too, like a spear. Has a reach effect, so it can actually attack ahead of somebody, say, wielding a dagger, which is technically a faster weapon, but with the reach effect. And your strike rank number determines in what order you attack in combat. But it takes all those factors into play to determine it. And it's a little, as Brian said, in the starter set, they have the strike rank tracker thing, because combat can be a little bit
Clunky?
imposing, flunky and imposing, and a little daunting to look at.
Yeah, I think it's clunky because I'm not familiar with it, and that's why it feels clunky to me. But I'm sure once
Clunky to look at or intimidating. That was actually going to be my next follow-up. RC and Brian, before you've made characters, how intimidated did you feel about the system?
before I
I'll
made the
let Brian
character,
go first.
Before you made your character.
well, before I made my character, I was in bliss because I was ignorant, and I felt like I knew that there was a lot of stuff. But then when we rolled the characters, I was like, "Oh wow, there's a lot of stuff here." And it got I think after I rolled my character, I was more intimidated. I was excited, but I was like, "There's a lot here," because it's.
Just a lot of content, a lot of lore.
I mean, the character sheet is 4 pages, and that's the largest character sheet I've ever had, personally.
And I think that's the smallest version of the character sheet, is the 4-page version. I think there may be either a 6 or an 8-page version that elaborates out and such more. But
It's
think
fantastic. Don't get me wrong; it's great, but it is a little daunting. Yeah.
And RC.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think I've made 3 characters now, and on the first 2, I essentially made the same character twice in different ways, and I was way more daunted by it then. But the time that I got around to making, I can't remember if I made 3 or 4 now. I have a better feel for what's going on with it. Honestly, the most intimidating thing to me, because I still really haven't had a chance to get too much into it, is the different kinds of cults. As it relates to where your character is from or where they currently live. Um, there's a lot of background to the game. That's the part that's the most intimidating to me, just because it feels like I didn't read enough into it beforehand.
Yeah, I recommend, since I just got that mythology book, give that thing a good flip through. It explains a lot. When I made my first character, I was intimidated. I'm not gonna lie about that, but I also liked how nested the mechanics were in together with themselves. like, oh, I picked this primary rune. It's what my god's about, and he's super about it. Then later in character creation, that's your primary rune. You get a couple bonuses here and there. It's like that makes sense because the rune is like super connected to my character.
Yeah, I mean, it seems daunting, and I think after the first one, I I I feel better about doing it now. Like I feel better doing the grandparents and the parents, even though you know, um, 90% of my grandparents and parents, I feel like have ceased to exist when I've rolled characters.
Died horribly.
Yeah, yeah.
And
How many
Roll on the random death chart.
and
how many characters do we get that were raised by their aunts and uncles?
which is, in a sense of like historical accuracy in the real world, is an actual thing that you read about. Uh, is so and so plague came through, so the prince was raised by his uncle that ruled as a regent, until he came of age to be able to take the throne, kind of thing. But as far as the other core mechanics, also combat and things like that, even though while daunting and very detail oriented, they have a definite flow and logic to them. And that's one thing also I think needs to be said, and I think you guys might agree with, is that things happen in character creation and combat and the system, but there's a logic to why it happens. It's not just arbitrary and random, like, oh my gosh, why do you have to roll this? You know, there's like, okay, you do this and then you do this, and there's steps. And once you're familiar with the steps and everything kind of has a flow and an elegance and to it that, you can't quite get a feel for until you kind of get in and get yourself dirty.
There's also that. There's also the contextualization, like of how your god like changes your character massively. It's just like, no. Your character has these following tenets, and they got to follow them. Otherwise, your god is pissed.
Hey, you know how magic's important? What if it got taken away from you? Oh boy.
But also, like depending on what god you pick, not only does it like change what spells you get, depending on your god, you might be the only like cult that gets that spell.
Not to mention when you die and Daka Fall's about to read your rights, he asks if anybody wants to stand up for you, and if you shunned your god, sorry, bud.
Well, also, too, as I've seen said before in other discussions, groups, and such like that about RuneQuest, is, you know, magic and the gods and the runes is so integrated into everything in RuneQuest that the rarest of all characters would be an atheist in this world, because they would have to literally deny the existence of the world around them.
Especially when they can see like gods actually influencing things. It might not be super direct depending on the location, but like depending on where you go, you might actually run into an actual god. Dumb bat thing.
The god travels across the sky every single day.
Before getting dragged into the underworld, and that's why we have night.
Yeah, the mythology is real in RuneQuest. That's why these runes are so important. Is like, and this is going more. We're attempting to do a 5,000 level view of this, um, because once you get deeper and you learn more about the actual gods and god time and all this stuff, you have a better context as to why things are the way they are now.
Do we have anything on closing on our intro episode into RuneQuest?
I guess my closing would be, regardless of your familiarity with role playing in general, if you are motivated by an interest in the setting and the style of play in RuneQuest, it is well worth the investment of time and energy to learn, to participate in, and such like that. It is not a game that, you know, once you get in it, you can learn. It becomes easier and easier to learn. Don't let it intimidate you away from it, because it is a rich and rewarding system.
Yeah, I would say the same.
I would also say that it's been around since the 60s with White Moon. Is it Red Moon, White Moon? I always confuse those two.
It's White Bear, Red Moon.
Yeah, but it's been around since the 60s. So like you're talking about a game in a game world that's been around since before Star Wars, and people still talk about it and playing it. It's probably worth at least checking out. And if you find you don't like it, that's fine. But like, it does have the wherewithal to last that long, at least.
It's lasted longer than most nations. But no, it definitely is like a really interesting system. And if you want something that is going to give you a setting, it gives you a world to work with right off the bat. And if you actually take the time to like learn and fall in love with it, it'd be well worth your time.
It pays dividends.
Yeah. Like I already like it, and I have a feeling that this little group, at least here, is definitely like, yeah, I'm willing to jump into this at first. If we're really gonna do this, it's gonna be something we'll be on for a while.
Well, you're also talking to two people in this room that have almost the entire product line.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Liar!
I will say I'm very gracious and thank you for sharing information with me, because I feel like every time I start reading anything, any of the books, I just get caught up reading. Like, I'll lose like 4 hours and be like, oh man, I have all this random information now. It's great.
And the thing is, you can spend 4 hours reading and be like, okay, I now know everything about Dakafal, but I still don't know much about any of the other gods. There's that much depth to the material that you can spend 4 hours and still walk away like, yeah, I need to spend more time reading.
Well, I want to thank all our listeners for joining us. Next week's episode is going to be us covering Delta Green again, but we're going to follow up with Runequest on a deeper look into lore, god time, post god time, and the runes themselves. And we'll have a future follow-up with Lindsay making a character in Runequest. That way all our listeners can get a full exposure to the system and concept.
Sounds good.
Yay!
I want to thank all our listeners for joining us, and have a good night.